Hello everyone, welcome back again to another tutorial. So if you want to know how to make these beautiful pencil skirts with ruffles and butt contour that helps exaggerate your curves and make your booty look so nice, then this video is for you. So if you're ready, let's get to it. Pattern I'll be using, these are the measurements I'll need: the waist, the hip, the knee length and the skirt. So I'm only going to divide the waist and hip into two, which is I'm going to divide it into the front and the back, and this is the formula to achieve that. So for the front waist, you'll be dividing the waist by 2 and then you add 1 for those with flat tummy, 1.5 for those with medium tummy size, and 2 for those with very big tummy. And this is because the front waist is always more than the back waist because of the presence of the tummy. So because of I have a flat tummy, kind of, I decided to use 1 for myself. So as you can see in the second row, I divided my waist by 2 and I added 1, which gave me 15. And for the back, I divided my waist by 2 and I subtracted 1, which gave me 14. So for the hip, the same thing, but this time around, the back hip is always bigger than the front because of the presence of the butt at the back, which makes it bigger. So for the front hip, you'll be dividing your hip by 2 and you subtract it by 1 or 1.5 or 2 inches, depending on the butt size. So because of I had a small butt, I said to use 1 for myself, and so I divided my hip by 2 and I subtracted it by 1 for the front, which gave me 17 and a half. And for the back, I divided my hip by 2 and I added 1, which gave me 21 and a half. So in order to do yours, just know the category your tummy and your butt fall into and slot in your measurements and do the calculation. So after getting this, let's move to the drafting part. To draft the front skirt pattern, you will be using your front hip measurement this time around to fold your pattern. So my front hip is 17 and a half. So I folded my paper using 17 and a half divided by 2, which is 8 3/4. So I've just marked that and I've rolled that. So now I'm going to draw a line here, which will be my starting point and also my waistline. From there, I'm going to mark 8 inches downward for the hip depth. And I'm also going to mark my knee length, which is 18 inches, and also my full length of 29 inches. So after marking this, I'm just going to rule the lines. Then I'm going to mark my hip guideline of 1.5 inch above my hip line and 2 inches below my hip line. This is to help me have a nice curve and to prevent having pointy around the hip area. So for someone with very big hips, I've advised to use 2 inches above and 2.5 inch below. So now I'm going to mark my waist measurement divided by 2, and my waist is 15. So 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So I'm going to connect this to my hip guideline using the curved part of my ruler. So for the knee parts, I'm just going to mark 1 inch. You can decide to make yours 1.5 depending on how fitted you want the knee to be and how much you want to remove from your knee. So because I have a small hip, I'm just going to use 1. For larger hips, you can use 1.5. And for the hem, I'm going to remove 1.5 to make it more pencil. Like I said, you can also make yours more. So I'm just going to connect my hip guideline to my knee and then my knee to my hem, just like that. So after that, the final thing to do is to mark 1/2 inch below your waistline. So we are going to bring down the waist by 1/2 inch up to the middle part, and then we are going to connect it back to the hip line using a curve. This step is actually not compulsory, but it just helps find your waistline. So after that, I'm just going to cut out this front waist pattern, and this is how it is. So let's get to the back. So for the back, I just folded my pattern using my back hip measurement divided by 2 plus my 1 inch zip allowance. So right now I'm just marking my 1 inch zip allowance. So I'm going to mark and roll this. So after that, now I'm going to mark my back hip measurement divided by 2, and my new back hip is 21.5, so divided by 2, that's 10 3/4. So I just marked it and I'm going to roll this. And after that, I'm going to rule a line to mark the beginning of my pattern, and I'm going to mark another 1 inch line downwards. This line will serve as my hip raising, okay? And then I'm going to mark my hip depth, my knee length, and my full length. So I'm just going to roll all the lines. Then next, I'm going to mark my hip guideline of 1.5 inch above and 2 inches below. I'll mark my 1 inch on my knee part and 1.5 inch on my hem, and I'm going to connect all the lines. In order to get that fitted and snatched bum, this is where you need to work. You need to work on your zip allowance. You need to be able to pinch in the waist and the knee part so that you will create a bum room or a butt room. So the first step is, on your zip allowance, you are going to mark 3 inches above your hip line and below your hip line. So I just marked 3 inches above and below my hip line. So let's do the knee part first. So for the knee, I'm going to go in. All measurements should start from the zip allowance. So from the knee, I'm going to measure 1.5 inch. Are you seeing? So from here, I measured 1.5 inch, and I'm just going to mark it here on the knee line and on my full length line. So after marking this 1.5 inch, I'm going to connect it. And then you use your straight ruler to connect this point to this. Just like this. So as you can see now we have started forming our butt room. So note that your zip allowance is still within this space. So if you're confused, all you need to do is, after marking this 1 inch, you mark your new zip allowance of 1 inch. So now I'm retracing my zip allowance. I'm just going to use a dotted line to mark it, and then I'm connecting it back here. Okay, let me roll it so that it looks a bit confusing. Good. So now this is going to be your new zip allowance. Don't forget, we are working from the 3 inches we marked below the hip line. So now let's go to the one we marked above the waistline. So what I'm going to do is, from this, I'm going to start my waist now from this 1 inch I left above my waistline. So from this 1 inch, I'm going to connect it straight to the 3 inches above the waistline now, using a curve ruler. Now after that, I'm going to mark another 1 inch, creating my new zip allowance, and then I'll connect this. So now this is my new zip allowance. So I'm going to cut off this part and here. So can you see now that you have now given your pattern a butt shape? So now you have created room for your bum. So now let's finish up with the darts. So after my zip allowance, what you're going to do is, you are still working on this point, which is on your waistline, not on this one. So now I'm going to mark my back waist width, and my back waist width is 14. So 14 divided by 2 is what? 7. So I'm just going to mark 7 inches, and I'm going to mark another 1 inch for my dart allowance, so making it 8 inches. So all you have to do is, from this your dart allowance, you connect it to your hip, connect it to the point above your hip. So now what you're going to do here is, from the middle of this point, you just use your curve ruler to connect it back to your original waistline. I'm sure you must have seen this when making trousers, just like the way trousers come, that the back waist is always higher than the front. That is how we are making this our pattern. Trust me, you're going to have a much better fit using this pattern. So for our darts, to mark our dart line, I'm going to mark the middle point of my hip line, which I've marked 5.5. Then when it comes to my waist, for my waist dart, I'm going to mark 3.5 inch after my zip allowance. So at this 3.5 inch after my zip allowance, I'm going to connect it to a straight line to the middle point of my hip. And after connecting that, I'm just going to mark 1/2 inch both ways, creating my dart. And for this, your dart should stop 3 inches above your hip line. Please, it should stop 3 inches above your hip line. So I'm just going to connect this to this point and this to this point, and voila. So I'm just going to cut out the patterns. Please watch how I cut it so you don't make mistake while cutting yours. And as I'm cutting it, you can see the way our butt looks. You can see how the contour has defined the shape of the butt, and that is how it's going to define your own shape. So this is the back and this is the front pattern. I'm just going to label it front and back. So while cutting this on your fabric, just add your desired allowance by your sides, the bottom, and 1/2 inch allowance at the top. So this is how to draft a pencil skirt with butt contour. So I divided this video into two because I don't want it to be so lengthy. In the second video, I'll be showing you how to cut and sew the pencil ruffle skirts. So please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and see you next time. Bye.